Hi everyone, to research methods, and we're on to week 9, so we're almost done the course. This week, looking at reporting and the use of the research. So, thinking about once you've actually completed the research, how are you going to present it, what means methods, what's important, things like that. For today, looking at a few things in the news, then talking a bit about publishing results, some recommendations on writing up your reports, and then just briefly looking at a few other ways to present results. So, in the news, somewhat unrelated to tourism, but I guess related very much to the sort of stuff that you guys are doing right now. And the Gates Foundation is funding some online university courses, or online university programs. I've got the link there, and if you want to get to it, probably best to pause this presentation and then go through that. But essentially, a lot of programs are now going online, as you guys, are experiencing. So, and discussion on what that online access will do, opening up programs and courses and education to people in many different areas, and whether this will actually kind of even out the playing field when it comes to education. Obama, after his win in the United States, Obama visits the country of Myanmar, which used to be called Burma, and he is the very first U.S. president, who's actually president at the time, to visit the country. So, and a bit of discussion that with him visiting there, and it kind of making people more aware of the country, how that will impact tourism to Myanmar. Just kind of one of those stories of new destinations that are coming out and what sort of competition that creates for existing locations. Finally, Mexico. Mexico says tourism gross domestic product, or GDP, continues to rise. And latest reports out of Mexico, or from Mexican tourism, is that they're expecting a record over 200 million visitors to the country. And a little image there from the Yucatan Peninsula, one of the Mayan ruins there. So, talking about presenting results, and I guess just that nice little reminder that when your research is done, at least the field research part of it, even when your analysis is done, there's still the job of getting that information out, getting it to the people who might make use of it, and getting it useful, getting it off the shelf and out into the real world. And the importance there is, not only finding the relevant audiences, but also communicating it in a way that they're going to understand. Different audiences have different means, different ways of understanding things, and so you need to put things into a format that they're going to make use of. Example there, academic audiences quite generally have fairly strict ideas on what should and should not be in a presentation, and quite often that sort of presentation is very different from what you might be presenting to industry. Different priorities, different things that they're interested in. So, again, know your audience. The goal, hopefully, for all of you, is to have a report that's readable, believable, and usable by your audiences. And what that will mean sometimes is that you might have to actually have multiple reports depending on if you have multiple audiences for your information. So, just be prepared for that sort of thing. What also happens sometimes with that then is that you might see the exact same bit of research in different journals, different articles, different places, and you start to recognize it, but each one of those versions might have a slightly different focus depending upon what the expected audience for that journal or for that publishing are. Now, I guess before you actually go to get published and things like that, make sure that you've made all of your research participants aware. And in fact, in many cases in that ethical involvement process, all of your participants should be aware right from the start, before they even get involved in the research, that the research results might be published. Granted, you can generally assure anonymity, confidentiality, but they still need to know what's going to happen to the report after it's done. And quite often the people that participate will actually want a copy of it, sometimes before, but definitely at the same time as everyone else. Your research sponsors are another key consideration, and they may need to see the report and even approve of the report before it gets published. And finally, anybody that gets involved, at least in a significant way, in your report, in your research, always a good idea to, acknowledge them. A few other things to consider before you actually have it published, so that you're not going to run into issues after the fact. If you have borrowed, quoted, used any other report, any other information, you're often better to err on the side of caution and report where that information came from. It's no good after the fact to have somebody go, well, actually that data, that idea, that framework, whatever, that actually came from this other person. Because then that calls into doubt all of your information. When you're using any quotes, especially, and I've seen this a few times, when you say Harris quoted in Robson, things like that. If at all possible, check back and find that original quote and actually use the original quote. Wherever possible, try not to use a reference of a reference, because at times, and I've seen this before, that original reference isn't quite what the second person says. And if you're just perpetuating that error, then all of it starts to get called into question. So again, wherever possible, go back to the original quote. Avoid any sexist language, such as, businessmen, firemen, things like that, if it refers to both genders. When you go to report your research, a lot of academic journals have certain guidelines that you can get and download that will give you an idea of the way that they want things reported. And it's, it creates a lot of trouble, and It can reduce the likelihood of you getting published if you're not going to follow their rules. Sometimes it's as simple as, taking a look at a few of their publications to get a sense not only of what sort of standards that they have, but even just the general format. Because not all journals use the exact same format when they go to present results. A few other things to consider if you're going to, and I'll talk about them later, but a few other ways if you want to, get your research findings out there by going through conferences. And, you may not actually be one of the key presenters at the conference, but a lot of conferences will also have what's called a poster session, where you can set yourself up with a table and a few posters in the lobby, maybe not during the entire conference, but at a certain time during the conference. And it draws people in and allows you to just discuss some of your results. And that can be a good way, at least to start to get your name and your information out there. But again, always be clear on what the expected format is for whatever route that you happen to be taking. Scientific journals tend to have a certain way that, or a certain amount of information that needs to be presented. And so what I've got here is kind of just a typical listing of some of the key categories and some of the ideas that might be in each of these categories. Starting with the title, a very brief abstract of what somebody's going to find in your research, in your report. And think of that abstract almost like just a mini marketing or a little, Reader's Digest condensed version taster of what's going to be in the research. For one thing, that little abstract is there to give potential other researchers a sense of whether or not your research is relevant to them, relevant to their needs. But that abstract also serves like a little marketing tool, so make it interesting. Put some good information into the abstract and draw them into your research. And once you've got them there, then the rest of the report hopefully stands by itself. Your introduction should really just give enough information for the reader to understand what's going on, but don't expect to give them all of the information. Don't expect to, spend too much time in your introduction, because for the most part, most people, when they're reading a scientific journal article, they're really interested in the results and the discussion, a bit about the method, how did you do it, and does that method sound useful? Maybe they want to try that method somewhere else. But your introduction is just there to give them a sense of the general situation. So don't spend too much time or effort on that part. And again, results and discussion, make sure you've given them good amount of information there, because that's what most people tend to be focused on. With qualitative information, it's slightly different. To begin with, there's generally no real set format, even less so than there is with quantitative research. But it's also important to remember that background, that introduction part, is somewhat more important in this situation, because a lot of qualitative information is based on that environment, that understanding of the context of the situation. So it's very important that, again, all the really relevant information, all the really relevant stuff about the environment, the context, is presented to the reader. Some of the things to think about if you're going to do a qualitative report, which I think some of you or many of you are. These are some ideas out of Robson. Things like tell what the study was about or came to be about. And by that, for some of you, you might go into a qualitative bit of research with a flexible method, with one idea, and then you end up with a much different result and a much different looking bit of research than you originally thought. And it's important to note that in your report. Provide as much information as you can. Give them the base bit of information as well as how you interpret it. And with a lot of this stuff, it's better if you interpret things for the reader, because the more you leave it up to them, the greater the likelihood that they will interpret things differently than you. So just remember that. Now, the full research report, the sort of thing that you guys are going to be working on for your 690 project. This is just a bit of a very rough look at some of the categories that you would probably have within your report, including your title, of course, abstract, table of contents, introduction on what your problem or your issue or your research discussion, your research question is, a good solid literature review about your topic, but also in that literature review, or at a minimum in your research methods section, you need to be talking about not just your topic, but also some basis behind the methods that you've chosen to use for your research. So if you've chosen to do some a quantitative survey, a bit of questionnaire, and you're wanting to look, and possibly you're using maybe a scale that you found out of a human resource text, make sure that you've identified that. Make sure that you've demonstrated that not only your background information on your topic is solid, but also your understanding of how to carry out the message, carry out the research is solid. Something else to consider is, making sure that you've presented your data and analysis, and discussing all of the data, ending off with a summary of your findings. And the summary of the findings, that's when you get into the real discussion, and finishing off the circle, bringing things back to your original research questions, and thinking about how your research has answered, or sometimes maybe not answered, your original research questions, and talking about the implications. What does your research actually mean? Not just what did the numbers say, but interpreting them and explaining how people should be thinking about the results. With that sort of lessons learned, and any weaknesses, any concerns, any problems that you might have, and areas for future research. A few different ways to report a case study, and again, a few of you are possibly looking at case studies. One format what's called a suspense structure, where right at the start you present a lot of your main findings, and then through the rest of the report you present the information that supports those initial main findings. A narrative report, where it's you bringing things around and taking people all the way through the whole process, from the start to the finish, almost like bringing people a story. With a comparative structure, what can happen with the comparative is either looking at the same case several different ways to explain a situation, or comparative can also be if you've done possibly 2 case studies. You've looked at 2 situations that are appropriate for your case, and based on that, and you compare them back and forth to say what each of them have to say about your research, about your research question. Finally, a theory generating structure, if you're using your case study to actually develop a new theory, that sort of grounded theory, grounded idea. And with that, you really want to be careful how you present your case so that you're really building things up throughout the presentation of the case to support your idea of the theory. So, again, we kind of come back to the whole idea of the audiences. And, as I said earlier, depending upon the needs and the type of audience that you have, that can really affect how you present the information and what you present and things like that. Quite often a technical non-academic report has a much different format than an academic report might. Frequently they're a lot shorter, much more to the point, very plain English. A lot of technical non-academic reports generally leave out most of those, background theories, or, some of the main sources back behind some of the information. Brown 1992, Robson 2011, things like that. Unless it's talking about certain numbers, then you might say where the numbers came from, because that sort of thing provides the confidence in the numbers that they came from a realistic source. So it's really important for you to know what's expected by the audience. If you're going to write a technical report, that sort of non-academic report, if you can, get some examples from that particular user, that audience, to see how they normally have their reports. As an example, when I worked with Parks Canada, we actually ended up changing the reports because we found, after looking at some of the previous examples, they were written very dry, very wordy, and they were spending most of their lives on the shelves. So we completely reformatted how we were presenting and writing up these technical reports of research into almost like a PowerPoint publishing, where we were using graphs and color-coded charts and things like that, so that the managers could very easily see what the information had to say and would actually make more use of the information. Make sure you've got a good executive summary. Short, to the point, but giving enough of the key information for the manager to make some good decisions. In some cases, that might be the only part of your report that they actually read, or that certain people read. So if they need to get more, if you've piqued their interest with your executive summary, they can always read the full report. But there should be enough in that executive summary to be useful for them. And all of your non-essential information, put it into your appendices. Examples would be things like your actual questionnaire that you used. That doesn't need to be in the body of the report. Put that in the appendices. Any other tables and charts that you're not directly referring to. If you've condensed, a chart down, you might put the full table and everything into the back of the report, but just show what the important part in the body of the report. And sometimes you'll even see the appendices publish in their own separate document. Example of that, the Banff Bow Valley study had one main report, and then I believe it had several published appendices that were used in the actual development of the main report. A few more things. Report professionalism. And this is one thing I've been trying to stress throughout this course, is what you present and how you present it is directly a reflection of how it will be interpreted by the reader. So all of the spelling and grammar and everything needs to be perfect. The report needs to be easy to read. Any jargon needs to be left out, unless these are terms that are typically used by your audience. And even then, just be very careful. And it's very easy for you as the writer to skip over and miss things. So wherever possible, try to get somebody else to read your report before you submit it. Okay? Because again, you lose the credibility in how it's written, you lose the credibility in the information contained. Few recommendations. When you're writing up your recommendations for your report, make sure that they're easy to understand, that they're practical, and they're easy for somebody to connect to the research findings. So there needs to be that clear connection, that clear line between the research findings and any recommendations you give. If you start going too far out on the limb with some of your recommendations, again, you start to lose credibility. It's important to be very clear when you're presenting information in the report about what was the actual findings, what are your interpretations of the findings, and what are your judgments or your recommendations. Because it very clearly sets out, where there's judgment and where there wasn't. And always give yourself enough time to think about the recommendations for the report. As well, give your research client a bit of time to think about and absorb any recommendations that you give before actually publishing your report. At times, you're going to want to give some options to the recommendations. this is one interpretation, this is another, this is one thing you can do, this is another thing you could try if that first thing doesn't work out, or if this first thing isn't realistic. By giving more options, you just make it easier for them to follow your expectations. Again, before you actually publish your final report, before you even present your final report, it's best to discuss the information with the potential sponsors. And it's always good to be very clear about who's going to implement your recommendations, because then it's much easier for people to buy in on your report. A few other things you can think about when you're going to report your recommendations or your publishing findings. Oral presentations, workshops, pamphlets or guides, even news releases can be used to present your research findings. And each one of these different ways of presenting the results will quite often warrant a different style, a different approach, potentially even different content in order for you to maximize the method that you're using and, you know, assist people in kind of understanding and making use of the information. For example, electronic presentations. PowerPoint and Keynote, and Keynote, for those of you that aren't aware, is an Apple product. It's actually how I record all of these presentations. Those are kind of the two most common methods used if you're going to present your information in an electronic format. Lots of, you know, little tools and features and everything to make it easier and, you know, jazz up your presentation. But I guess as a word of warning, make sure that, you know, whatever you use, that you don't let the media overwhelm the message. I remember sitting through one presentation where this person had just learned how to use PowerPoint, so they added in every single little, you know, gadget and trick and things like that throughout the whole presentation. And the end result was I have no idea what the presentation was about because I was too busy watching all the neat little things that the person was doing. But it actually got tiring by the end of it because it's like, oh, next slide, oh, they're doing something different. Oh, something different on the next slide. So just remember again, think about how things will be perceived by your audience. News releases. Now, news releases probably aren't as common now as they used to be because there's so many more ways for people to, I guess, self-publish through things like, you know, Twitter and Facebook and different things like that. But you can use a news release through your traditional media. And if you're planning on using a news release, make sure that you've presented things in a way that that particular media's audience will want to make use of it. And if you have done most of the work for that media, you kind of increase the likelihood that your story will get published. Finally, some last minute thoughts on presenting the results of your research. Just remember, when you're presenting the results of your research, you are not the audience. Whoever you're presenting that information to is the audience. So you need to think about their needs, not your own. Always give yourself enough time for revisions and fixing things up. Whenever possible, trial your report with an audience that is similar to who you're going to be presenting it to. And finally, learn from the good and the bad experiences. No doubt some of you will have a bad presentation experience. Don't dwell on it, learn from it, and move on. Happens to everyone. All right, thanks everyone, and good luck this week. And don't forget, next week it's going to be a bit more of an open presentation, just talking about experiences, and hopefully you guys come back to me with some ideas on what you'd like to talk about. Okay, thanks and have a good day.